The alarm buzzes in the dark, insistent, and Maya's hand finds it before it can ring a second time. The way exhausted people learn to move before they've even fully woken. For a moment she just lies there, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that's been slowly spreading for 3 months. The landlord's voicemail box permanently full. Her phone screen is cracked at the corner, spiderwebbing out from a drop she doesn't remember, and behind the crack a calendar crammed edge to edge with cleaning jobs back to back, color-coded in a system only she understands. On the fridge, held up by a magnet shaped like a lemon that used to make her smile, a past-due notice still carries Ryan's name at the top of the lease. Right above hers, a ghost she can't get removed from the paperwork no matter how many calls she makes. 6 months since he left, she thinks, swinging her legs out of bed. 6 months since he left me the apartment and the debt and the credit cards he opened in my name because his own were maxed out 3 times over. Funny how the one thing he was ever generous with was his mess. She showers quickly, the water lukewarm because the heater's been acting up and she can't afford to have it looked at yet. Not this month. She pulls on her uniform in front of a mirror with a crack running through the corner of it too. Everything in this apartment's slightly broken, slightly held together, and ties her hair back with practiced hands. Tucked into the edge of the mirror frame is an old photo, half of it torn away, just her face and one shoulder, the rest of the picture, the half that used to be him, gone. She doesn't linger on it. She's trained herself not to. She grabs her supply bag, checks that her rag, her spray bottles, her knee pads are all where they should be, and steps out into a morning that hasn't decided to be warm yet. The street is quiet in the particular way that belongs only to people who work before the rest of the city wakes up. Delivery trucks idling, a bakery just opening its shutters, the smell of bread not yet finished. A corner store owner, an older man who's watched her walk this route for a year now, sees her pass and gives her a small nod, wordless. The kind of kindness that costs nothing and somehow means everything on a tired day. She counts bus fare twice in her palm before she boards, not because she doesn't trust her own counting, but because counting it twice feels like control over something. Anything, in a life where so little currently is. Her phone buzzes. Her supervisor, before she's even reached her seat. You're covering the Ashford Tower unit today. Client's picky, I hear. New tenant in the penthouse. Don't be late. I'm never late, Maya says, flat, and hangs up before the woman can find something else to criticize. Some other small failing to hold up to the light. She straightens her spine before stepping onto the bus. A private ritual she performs every single morning. A way of telling her own body it still deserves to take up the space it takes up, even in a world that keeps handing her reasons to apologize for existing at the size she exists at. She sits by the window. A few seats up, a younger woman glances back at her uniform, leans toward her friend, whispers something Maya doesn't need to hear to understand exactly what it is. Maya's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly, but she doesn't turn her head, doesn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. People look at the uniform before they look at you. She thinks, an old thought, worn smooth from repetition. I stopped waiting for them to look twice a long time ago. She pulls a small, dog-eared notebook from her bag, her debt tracker, numbers written in careful, determined handwriting, some crossed out, most not. $14,612. She crosses off another small figure from this week's earnings, watches the total shrink by a number that feels both enormous and insultingly small at the same time. Still a long way to zero. She closes the notebook before the number can make her feel any smaller than the morning already has and watches the city slide past the window instead. Gray buildings slowly giving way to glass ones. Ashford Tower rises up out of the sidewalk in a way that has clearly never expected someone like her to walk through its front doors. A doorman in a sharp navy uniform glances at her, then gestures toward the side of the building without really looking at her face at all. The way people look past service workers as a matter of course. Service entrance is around back. Ma'am. Sorry, could you? I know the way, she says, already moving, the words worn smooth from being said in 100 lobbies just like this one. She rides the service elevator up alone, watching the floor numbers climb. 20, 30, 40. Her reflection caught faint and steady in the brushed steel doors. Whatever she carries into a building like this, she carries it upright. That much, at least, is hers. The penthouse door releases with a soft electronic click when she enters the code left by the agency. Inside, cold marble, floor-to-ceiling glass, furniture so minimal and expensive it looks almost accusatory. A place that has clearly never once needed anyone in it to make it feel finished. She lets herself in and gets to work immediately, the way she always does, no wasted motion, wiping down surfaces that are already nearly spotless, humming something tuneless under her breath, present in her labor even when the day is already sitting heavy across her shoulders like something physical. She's halfway through the kitchen, wiping down a marble island large enough to seat 10 people who probably never eat there together, when a key card beeps against the reader at the front door. It opens. Ryan steps through it. Sharp suit, a haircut that costs more than her rent, the same practiced confidence he's always worn like cologne. Handsome in the particular way that curdles the instant he opens his mouth. He stops dead when he sees her, genuinely startled for one unguarded second before the mask slides back into place. Maya? She stiffens, cloth still gripped in her hand, her whole body going rigid before her mind even finishes processing what she's seeing. This is your client's place? Her voice comes out steadier than she feels. He smiles, slow, unbearably smug, already recovering his footing. Small world, isn't it? Guess some things never change, you're still cleaning up messes. Just a different address now. She doesn't answer him. She turns back to the counter, hoping, foolishly, she knows even as she does it, that ignoring him will make him leave the way ignoring a storm never once made a storm pass any faster. He doesn't leave. He begins to circle the kitchen slowly instead, the way a man moves when he has never once in his life faced a real consequence for anything he's done. You look tired, he says, watching her. Working 3 jobs now, I heard. All to pay off my debt. Debt you put in my name, she says, and disappeared the same week the first bill came due. He laughs, short and cold, genuinely amused by the accusation rather than ashamed of it. And yet here you are, still cleaning up after people who don't even see you standing there. He tilts his head, studying her body the way he used to when he thought cruelty disguised as observation was somehow romantic. Some women just weren't built for anything more than this. It's not an insult, Maya. It's just realistic. Get out, Ryan, she says, and this time there's steel underneath the exhaustion. But he doesn't move toward the door. Something shifts behind his eyes instead, the charm sliding off entirely like a coat he's decided he no longer needs, revealing the thing that was always underneath it, the thing she spent 3 years married to and 18 months since trying to forget the shape of. He steps closer, and his voice drops into something uglier, something with teeth. No, he says, you don't get to talk to me like that. Not after what you did, humiliating me in front of my family at that dinner, telling my mother about the accounts, making me look like, you left me, she says, cutting through it, refusing to let him rewrite the story again the way he always used to, one small revision at a time until she couldn't remember which version was true. With your debt, with your name still on my lease, with nothing. He grabs her arm, fingers closing hard enough to bruise. Neil. What? The word comes out of her as pure disbelief, her whole body going cold. You heard me. He's close now, too close, his voice pitched low, private. The voice he used to use in the last months before he left, when kindness had already curdled entirely into something else. Neil, show me you still know your place. You used to be so good at knowing your place, Maya, before you decided you didn't need me anymore. Her eyes well up despite every effort not to let them, not from fear exactly, not anymore, but from the sheer bone-deep exhaustion of being made small by someone who perfected the art of it over years, who could still, apparently, do it in seconds. Her knees begin to bend, not because any part of her believes she should be on them, but because some old, tired, well-trained part of her body still doesn't fully know how to refuse him, hasn't fully unlearned the reflex even 18 months later. For one long, terrible second, she thinks, I almost gave him what he wanted. Just to make it stop. Just to get through this the way I got through everything else with him, by making myself smaller until the danger passed. Then a shadow shifts near the private hallway at the far end of the penthouse. A voice cuts through the room, low, unhurried, absolutely certain of itself in a way that instantly changes the air pressure in the room. She doesn't kneel for anyone. Dimitri steps out of the hallway shadow into the light. Tailored, composed, the kind of dangerous that has never once needed to raise its voice to be believed. This is his penthouse. This has always been his penthouse. Ryan's face drains of color almost instantly, the smugness evaporating off him like water on a hot stove. Mr. Voss, he stammers, taking an involuntary step back. I didn't realize you'd be. Dimitri doesn't even look at him. His eyes go straight to Maya and stay there, taking in her face, her trembling hands, the mark already starting to bloom on her arm where Ryan gripped it. Get up, he says to her, gently, but with absolutely no room in it for argument. He crosses the room in a handful of unhurried strides and pulls her into his chest, one arm coming around her like a wall built out of pure intention, positioning his own body between her and Ryan so completely that Ryan can no longer even see her face. You only bow to me, he says to Ryan, and the words land quiet and lethal and final, the kind of sentence that ends arguments before they can properly start. Ryan tries to gather the scattered pieces of himself. This isn't your business, he says, some last reserve of nerve pushing the words out. She's not anything of yours, Dimitri says, cutting him off without raising his voice at all. And you are currently standing in my home, having just put your hands on someone under my protection. I think very carefully about your next sentence. He doesn't even need to raise a hand. He simply nods once, and two men materialize silently in the doorway behind Ryan. Gregor, built like a door frame himself, and Luca, younger, quieter, somehow more unsettling for his stillness. Neither of them says a word. They don't need to. Walk out, Dimitri says, or be carried out. I genuinely don't care which, but you have about 5 seconds to decide. Stripped entirely of whatever nerve he walked in with, Ryan backs toward the door, his eyes flicking between Dimitri, Gregor, Luca, and finally Maya, who won't meet his gaze anymore. This isn't over, he says, weak, grasping for one last shred of the power he came in with. It is now, Dimitri says. The door clicks shut behind him. The apartment goes silent in a way that feels almost loud after everything. Maya finally lets herself breathe. A long, shaking exhale that seems to come from somewhere much deeper than her lungs. Dimitri loosens his hold slightly, giving her space without fully letting go, studying her face with an unexpected gentleness that doesn't match anything she's heard about men like him. Are you hurt? He asks. No, she says, shaking her head, her voice cracking despite every effort to keep it steady. I didn't expect. She stops, unable to finish the sentence, unable to explain the particular vertigo of almost kneeling and then suddenly not having to. Nobody does, he says. Not until someone finally stands between them and the person who's been hurting them. That's usually the part nobody prepares you for. He bends down and picks up her supply bag from where it fell during the confrontation, straightens the bottles that spilled out of it, and hands it back to her. A small, oddly formal gesture that somehow means more to her in this moment than she has words for. You're done working today, he says. I still have 3 more units on my schedule, she says automatically, the habit of obligation too deeply worn to abandon even now. Not today, he says. Come with me. I don't even know you, she says, wary despite everything. Some self-protective instinct refusing to fully soften even now. Then let's fix that, he says, and something in his expression, not quite a smile but close to one, makes the offer feel less like a command and more like an actual choice being handed back to her, maybe for the first time in longer than she can remember. Downstairs, a sleek black car waits at the curb, engine already running. He opens the door for her himself, waving off the driver who moves to do it, and his own men exchange a brief, surprised glance at the gesture, like they've never quite seen him do that before. She slides into the leather seat, still shaken, her hands still not entirely steady, but no longer trembling the way they were upstairs. Through the tinted window, the city blurs past in unfamiliar streaks of color. The same streets she walks exhausted every single day, seen now from a completely different vantage point, moving at a completely different speed. Why did you help me? She asks eventually, watching his profile rather than the city now. You don't know me. You didn't have to do any of that. I know cruelty when I see it, he says, eyes still on the road ahead. And I know exactly what it costs someone to almost kneel just to keep the peace. I've seen it before. I don't much care for watching it happen twice in front of me. Is that a professional interest, she asks carefully, or a personal one? He glances at her then, something flickering behind his eyes that he doesn't quite let all the way to the surface. Both probably, he admits. I don't do many things that are purely one or the other anymore. They drive in a silence that isn't uncomfortable so much as full of things neither of them is ready to say yet, full of a day that has already reshaped itself twice before noon. Eventually the car turns off the main road, past a gate that opens without anyone visibly signaling it, into a converted warehouse-style residence, industrial on the outside, unexpectedly warm on the inside once the doors open. Exposed bricks softened by low lighting, guards posted at intervals who nod respectfully to Dmitri as he passes and study Maya with a curiosity they're too disciplined to voice. This isn't a normal apartment, she says, taking it all in slowly, cautiously. No, he agrees. And I'm not a normal man. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, not to you, not after what you just watched happen upstairs. What do you do exactly, she asks, choosing the question carefully. Gregor. Luca. The way that man's whole face changed the second he saw you. I make sure people who take what isn't theirs eventually answer for it, he says, sitting across from her now in a room that feels more like a study than anything else. Warm wood and low light replacing the cold marble of the penthouse entirely. Today, that happened to be him. Other days, it's been considerably worse people than him. Should I be afraid of you, she asks, and she means it as an honest question, not a rhetorical one. He considers it seriously, the way he seems to consider everything without rushing toward an easy answer. I think you should be exactly as afraid of me as the situation calls for, he says finally. Right now, I'd say not very. I have absolutely no interest in becoming one more person who makes you feel small in a room. Later, as the light outside the tall windows shifts gold and then blue toward evening, she sits with a cup of tea he made himself, insisting the staff not be bothered for something so simple. Finally still for what feels like the first time all day, maybe all month. He sits across from her, careful, deliberately, not to crowd the space between them. He controlled you with shame, Dmitri says, not a question. That isolation from people who might have told you the truth about him. A ring you probably ended up paying for yourself one way or another. How did you know that? She asks, genuinely startled, setting the cup down. Because men like him never actually pay for anything, he says. Not money, not consequences, not the people they hurt on the way to wherever they think they're going. It's always someone else covering the bill, in every sense of the word. I've made a career out of collecting from men exactly like him. I'm done being someone's punishment for his own failures, she says, quiet, but with a fierceness underneath it that surprises even her a little, hearing it out loud for the first time. Then let's make sure he understands that. Permanently, Dmitri says, leaning forward slightly, something sharp and focused entering his expression now, less warmth in it and more intent. Not for my sake, for yours. You get to decide what happens next, Maya. I'll simply make sure the door isn't locked when you decide to walk through it. Over the days that follow, something shifts between them slowly, without either of them naming it directly. She learns the rhythms of his world in careful pieces, the quiet respect his people show him, the way he listens more than he speaks, the particular stillness he carries into every room like a held breath. He learns her in turn. The exact careful way she folds a towel, a habit from years of being taught her work was the only value anyone would credit her. The way she still flinches, almost imperceptibly, at raised voices even when they have nothing to do with her, the dry, quick humor that surfaces once she stops bracing for the room to turn on her. One evening, going through the paperwork his people have quietly compiled, old bank statements, forged signatures, a trail of debt collectors Ryan sent circling toward her for money he owed, never once toward himself. Dmitri lays it all out on the table between them without ceremony. He's been doing this to more than just you, he says. 2 other women. Same pattern. Charm first, then debt, then disappearance, then, apparently, demands for whatever's left of their dignity if he happens to run into them again. Maya stares at the papers, feeling something cold and clarifying settle into place inside her, replacing the old shame with something considerably more useful. I don't want him quietly ruined somewhere I'll never see it, she says slowly, choosing each word. I want him to answer for it where it happened, where he made me feel like nothing. I want the same street that watched me shrink to watch him do it instead. Dmitri studies her for a long moment, something that might be pride moving behind his eyes. Then that's exactly what we'll build, he says. The plan comes together over the following days, not violence, she's clear about that from the start, and he respects it without argument, but something more precise and considerably more lasting. The debts he never paid, called due all at once through channels that suddenly, quietly stop looking the other way. The building manager who conveniently overlooked his fraud finally receiving documentation impossible to overlook. A meeting orchestrated carefully to land on the same street corner outside the same buildings where Ryan once counted on nobody noticing what he did. The day arrives bright and unremarkable. An ordinary afternoon on an ordinary block, except that Maya walks it differently now than she did months ago. Composed, dressed with a quiet, settled kind of confidence that has nothing to do with what she's wearing and everything to do with what she now knows about herself. Dmitri walks a careful distance behind her, present but never hovering, close enough to matter, far enough to let this belong entirely to her. Ryan is already there when she arrives, cornered without quite understanding yet that he's cornered. Creditors he can no longer dodge, the building manager holding papers he can no longer explain away, and, gathering slowly at the edges, neighbors, the corner store owner, even the doorman from Ashford Tower, drawn by the particular gravity of a public reckoning finally arriving for a man who spent years assuming one never would. "Maya, please," Ryan says, panic breaking cleanly through the last of his composure as he sees her approaching. "Whatever this is, we can talk about it, we can—" "You wanted me on my knees," she says, and her voice doesn't shake at all now, calm and clear and carrying easily across the small gathered crowd. "Now the whole street gets to watch you finally answer for what you did. To me, to the others, to everyone you counted on staying quiet." The weight of it finally lands on him all at once. The debts, the fraud, the accumulated years of unpaid consequence arriving together in the space of a single afternoon, and he sinks down onto the curb, head dropping into his hands, not staged, not theatrical in the least, a real and total collapse under the sudden unbearable weight of his own arrogance finally, fully catching up with him in front of every person who once watched him charm his way past consequence entirely. Maya turns away from him without a single further word. Nothing left to say to a man who has just said everything about himself without speaking at all. Dmitri steps up quietly beside her and offers his arm, not to lead her anywhere, not to claim any part of this moment as his own, but simply to walk alongside her through whatever comes next. "How does it feel?" he asks low just for her. "Like I finally stopped waiting for permission to stand up straight," she says, exhaling something that feels like it's been held in her chest for years, not just months. They walk together down the same street she once walked exhausted and folded small into herself, past the same buildings, under the same sky. This time heads turn as she passes, not with the old pity, not with the whispered judgment from the bus that morning what feels like a lifetime ago, but with something closer to respect, the particular kind reserved for people who have just watched someone refuse, finally and completely, to be small anymore. "I used to think surviving was enough," she thinks, the corner store owner giving her a different kind of nod now as she passes, one that says he saw all of it and is glad. It isn't. Not anymore. Surviving was just the part before this. The last image holds on the two of them walking away together down the ordinary street, the gathered crowd slowly dispersing behind them. Ryan still small and folded on the curb in the distance behind them both. Finally, for the first time in his entire life, the one left kneeling, with no one left to demand it of him, and no one left who ever will again.